can I get your take on why it is, what would be the unspoken agenda to prevent Rebel News from covering this protest, whereas the likes of CBC, Global, CTV, they'll roll out the red carpet for those guys?
It's quite simple. Those news entities are actual government entities.
David Menzies for Rebel News here in Toronto. And folks, if you can, please go to journalistdefensefund.com. Sometimes we need the assistance of bodyguards in order to practice journalism because there are nefarious forces afoot that want to prevent us from bringing you the other side of the story. In any event, I am back here at Queen's Park in Toronto. I believe this is Yahoo Nation protest number 15. We've been coming here since April. We only missed 2 of the 15 so far. And I'm with Chris Skye and the lovely Miss Jenny. Now, before we get into the latest Wuhan virus regulations of what you can and cannot do, one of the reasons we're here, folks, is because, as I reported last week, when I came here for protest number 14, a Queen's Park security guard had told me that we were prohibited from broadcasting, from practicing journalism on the lawns of Queen's Park. I mean, can you imagine that? The hate fest that is known as Al-Quds, they can assemble here and chant all kinds of anti-Semitic slogans, but practicing journalism, covering a protest, that's verboten. The security guard said that they had turned a blind eye since April when we began coming here, but he got pressure from above. He didn't say who that person above was. Maybe it was Premier Doug Ford. Maybe he didn't like the idea of us having that exclusive interview with Belinda Carahalios, who of course was kicked out of caucus for having the temerity to vote against the government on Bill 195. Well, I can tell you, we don't bend the knee at the Rebel. You saw the same nonsense happen to us at Nathan Phillips Square. We were told by their security guards, which I think resemble glorified mall cops, to be quite frank, that we weren't allowed to practice journalism on the square when we had Afro-Indigenous occupiers occupying the square and breaking 11 sections of the Trespass Act for 21 days before they finally decamped to Dufferin Grove Park. Now, we have brought a lawyer with us. She is fantastic, and if we have any legal wrangling to do with these guards, we'll do it. Because the fact is, folks, we did some research. We can't see anything in the written legislation that backs up the guards' claim. They were telling us that because we are not accredited Queen's Park media, we are not allowed to be on the lawns of Queen's Park. Now, I can understand us not getting into the press gallery in the legislature behind me, but the lawns, this is by definition the public square. It is Queen's Park, as in Queen's Park for her subjects. This is the very definition of the public square. Now, there are a couple of, they're behind a tree, lo and behold. I guess they don't want to push this issue. But if they do, like I said, at the Rebel, we do not bend our knees. So, Chris, you and the lovely Miss Jenny, you are freedom fighters. You've been coming here since day one. What would be the unspoken agenda to prevent Rebel News from covering this protest, whereas the likes of CBC, Global, CTV, they'll roll out the red carpet for those guys?
It's quite simple. Those news entities are actual government entities. A CTV employee doesn't even have to wear a mask in their building because it's a federal building.
Oh, I didn't know that.
No, yes. Okay. As you know, the government puts all these laws on us for our safety, but then exempts themselves and their friends and family from these same laws so they can keep their freedoms intact and, in essential, control us. But like I said, those news media outlets are allowed here because they're not news at all. They're outlets of propaganda that are owned, directly funded, and controlled by the government. So they want one voice, which is the government's voice. They don't want real media like you guys that tell the truth. And the idea that they could ban somebody from here when virtually every single person here is somebody with a cell phone camera and is doing some type of interview or some type of video is ridiculous, which is why last week we brought you on the lawn. Yes. And we told you, I told you there's no law. They're just trying to scare you. And we wanted you to stand up to them. You wanted to wait till you got your lawyer. And now that you brought your lawyer, you saw, what did they do? They're literally cowering behind the tree. That's how much teeth their threat had.
Well, let's take a stroll and see what they have to say. All right. I'm David Menzies with Rebel News. Last week I came here and one of your colleagues told me that because we were not accredited by the Queen's Park Press Gallery, we were not allowed to practice journalism on the lawns of Queen's Park. Now, I understand not getting into the press gallery in Queen's Park, the legislature building, but surely was that a mistake, or did one of the guards misinterpret the rules?
Sorry, you were talking to a guard?
Yes, one of your call. Yes, sir.
From
No, a peace officer. We just want to know if we're allowed to practice journalism on the lawns of Queen's Park. That's all, officer.
the accredited media, sir.
To practice journalism on the lawns.
Accredited media for Queen's Park Borough. You don't have accredited media for Queen's Park.
You are right. I'm not.
Media outlets that are accredited to Queen's Park Borough.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about going into the legislature. I'm just talking about covering these protesters here on the lawns of Queen's Park.
Yeah, we prefer accredited media.
Prefer? Okay. Prefer doesn't mean it's a law.
It's a
right?
preference as opposed to a hardened,
That's all we want.
We just want to know if it's an actual written rule. We did some research. We brought our lawyer along with us, officer, and she did her research. We can't find anything that says that you have a legal right to expel us from the lawns of Queen's Park.
Did you get expelled last week?
I was told by your colleague that I could not be on the lawn, so I did my report from the traffic island.
I wasn't here last week. With all due respect, I can't speak on what my.
That's a fair answer. Yeah. Well, I appreciate your time, officer. So in other words, I can go down there, do my job, and you're not going to kick me off the grounds then?
Definitely not.
Me personally, no.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Have a safe weekend. Bye-bye. Okay, well, that's a different tune. So, like I said, we couldn't find any written legislation which would back up what that officer told me. I don't see that particular officer here today, but that was the lead officer, and he said he's not going to kick me off to the traffic island where we reported from yesterday. So maybe this was a rogue guard in misinterpreting the legislation that, as I said earlier, does not exist. But the good news is, looks like we can practice journalism in the public square after all, and not be given the bum's rush.
Told you.
Can you imagine that?
I did tell you last week on camera that you would be fine. I just want that on the record.
Okay, then. Thank you so much,
I would never
Chris.
let anything bad happen to you.
Well, let's go back into the fray of Yahoo Nation and see what they have to say, given that, unlike last week, evidently I am not media non grata. Well, there you have it, folks. I think the rebels scored another victory for freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and most importantly, perhaps, freedom of the press. Well, at least for us, because we like to tell you the other side of the story, and as you well know, there are forces afoot that like to shut us down, even with violence. But there's other forces afoot as well, such as bureaucrats, such as law enforcement that don't understand the law, especially a law that, in this case, didn't exist. But it's not cheap. We have to hire, in some cases, bodyguards, in other cases, lawyers. And we did indeed hire a lawyer on Saturday for our return to Queen's Park to assert our right to practice journalism from the lawns of Queen's Park, where, no, we don't need any kind of special license or permit. We don't need to be a part of the Queen's Park Press Gallery. We're not going in the legislature. We're going on the lawns of Queen's Park, for goodness sake, because if my argument didn't work, I had my lawyer there who was going to make her argument to the Queen's Park security. But like I said, they did unconditional surrender within minutes of our arrival, not us. So her services, at least speaking to the guards, weren't needed, but we still got a bill. I'm not begrudging it. She gave hours of her time to fight for freedom of the press. And I can tell you the bill, here's the total, $1,087.63. So again, I'm going to make a plea. If you can go to journalistdefensefund.com, that's journalistdefensefund.com. If you're able to, please make a donation. We have security bills, we have lawyers' fees, but we think it's worth it. We think fighting for our right to bring you the other side of the story is worth the cost that we incur, Because unlike the bought and paid for Justin Trudeau media, we here at Rebel News, we will never bend the knee. So please, if you can, support us. Thank you so much. Well, folks, bringing you the other side of the story does not come cheap. Sometimes we need security in order to bring you the other side of the story because there are forces afoot that don't want us to bring you the other side of the story. If you can, please go to journalistdefensefund.com. That's journalistdefensefund.com and make a donation.